Thanks, Erica. So, hi, everybody. My name is Peter Shannon, and I am the founder of the American Institute of Music and Healing. And as Helen said, the title of my talk today is How Lessons Learned by the American Institute of Music and Healing May Contribute to a Better Understanding of the Healing Attributes of Singing. So before I tell you what the American Institute of Music and Healing actually does, I'd just like to briefly introduce myself to you. I'm an orchestral conductor, and you can see there that I spent some time in Heidelberg in Germany before moving to the States, where I am now. I was the artistic director and conductor of the Savannah Philharmonic Orchestra and Chorus. This is in Savannah, Georgia, for about 12 years. After about 7 or 8 years into that stint at Savannah, I took on a second post with the Jackson Symphony, where I remain to the present day, but actually began life as a singer, like many of you. I was a boy chorister in St. Finbarr's Cathedral in Cork, and I sang at St. Patrick's Cathedral. Then later, I was a part of the RT National and Chamber Choir. And when I was in Germany, I was also, for many years, the conductor of what is called Voices of Europe. And I know this is interest Helen. It was a week-long choral course for ethnic minorities from all over Europe. So if any of you have tried to speak Sorbian, for example, you'll know that that's no mean feat. We'll cue the next slide there, Sorka, please. So unlike many other musicians, I wasn't born into a musical family, but rather a very medical one. Both my grandparents were doctors, and my father, Bill Shannon, was the first chair of general practice in Ireland. And all my siblings really are involved in healthcare. So this really, I suppose, has fueled my own interest in this area. Because as conductor of the Savannah Philharmonic, I began an outreach program. It's a term we use a lot in the States, outreach programs. And this one was not an education, but it was in integrative medicine, or what's now commonly known as mind-body medicine. And that I did at the Curtis and Elizabeth Anderson Cancer Institute, bringing musicians to play for chemotherapy patients there. And afterwards, I met Dr. Jackie Huntley, who remains my primary collaborator to this day. Jackie's a physician, but she's also a consultant for healthcare professionals who are dealing with different issues, which, ranging from burnout to career transitions to leadership development. And over the years, we've collaborated on putting together a structured training program for professional musicians in healthcare settings. And this led to the founding of the American Institute of Music and Healing. And because nobody wants to type into a website, internet, or into American Institute of Music and Healing, we've shortened it somewhat, and you can see that link up there. AmericanMusicandHealing.org, because that's the specification for a nonprofit organization. So if anyone wants to have a little look there later, www.AmericanMusicandHealing.org. Okay, Sorka, we'll take the next one, please. And we'll play this. This is a nice 3-minute video. You might stop it somewhere in the middle, Sorka, I'll tell you. So
we're so fortunate to have the physician-in-chief of the Anderson Cancer Institute with us, Guy Petrozelli. Guy, would you like to share some of your thoughts about the program that we have here with the Cancer Institute?
Well, thank you, Peter, and it's a great pleasure to be able to speak with you and to sort of share some of our experiences at the Anderson Cancer Institute about the integrative medicine program and about what the Savannah Philharmonic has brought to our cancer program here. So we know very clearly and very scientifically, actually, that integrative medicine and mind-body medicine is a true complement to what we do with conventional cancer care. So we know that chemotherapy, radiation therapy, surgery, all of the traditional ways to treat cancer really only goes so far. And if we can create an environment, a real healing environment for patients, we know that they tolerate their therapy better, they tolerate their therapy with less side effects, and their clinical outcome is actually better. And one way to do that, one way to create that environment is with music. So with individuals from your organization coming and spending time with us, both in the cancer center, in our outpatient setting, and in our inpatient setting, we're able to put the patients at ease and to allow the patients to be more mindful of where they are and to relax and to accept their therapy, have their body accept their therapy, and really facilitate the conventional therapy that they're receiving.
The healing process.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been studied in many different parts of the world, actually, where definite physiologic parameters. I mean, things you can measure, like heart rate and blood pressure, and even more sophisticated things like immunologic function, patient's T cells, you know, infection and cancer fighting T cells. The ability of those cells to fight cancer is actually enhanced
when they're
listening to live music, and when they're mindful, when they're meditating, when they're doing other things.
And I suppose when they're in an environment where they know there's a lot of empathy, and I think that comes as well when a musician comes into the room and is present with them, that they get the sense, more a sense that somebody is really looking after them or looking out for them.
Yeah, and the fact that it's a professional musician, the fact that it's a symphony musician coming to spend that time, and the music that they play, and how they present themselves.
Erica, I'll maybe give other people a link to that. It doesn't go on for too much longer, but I think we'll leave it there. And that is on YouTube, actually, if somebody wants to access it. Just put in Peter Shannon and Mind Body Medicine, or Guy Petrozelli, who's a wonderful doctor. But we'll take the next slide, please, then, Erica. Thanks. So over the years, different lessons have been learned by the American Institute of Music and Healing, which of course is the title of the presentation today. You know, lessons learned, unfortunately, also means making lots of mistakes. But one of the things that we had planned for, of course, was to create an experience to benefit patients. And what actually transpired was the experience was very positive for healthcare professions. It wasn't planned that way. And I would love to say that we had thought of that. We really didn't. And that experience made them happier in their workplace. And for the musicians themselves, playing for patients was recognized as a hugely rewarding experience. But I noticed something in the patients' responses and from the surveys that we did that made me think that something else was happening that was important, and that also I'd not expected. So have a look at some of these quotes, and we'll maybe read them together, but I'll just give you a little warning. There's one of them in here that's a bit of a red herring, but the rest of them, there's something going on that when I read them, I think, you know, there's something happening here. Now, these were taken over a long period. These are, you know, taken over years, but I've just taken a sample. So I'll read the first one. A lady asked for Ode to Joy. One of the things, by the way, that we do is we don't just go in and play music. We have a contact with the patient that I think is really, really important. And the patient gets to choose from a huge list of repertoire, which is broken into genres. They choose their song, which is important for a number of reasons, which I won't get into right now. But a lady in her 60s asked for the Ode to Joy. I chose Ode to Joy today because it's my last chemo day. A gentleman, I was present when he asked for O Mio Babino Caro. From my wife who's here with me, I want to dedicate this to her. And it was just such a wonderful moment when he turned to his wife and just looked at her, and she looked at him while the violinist, and I think it was a flute player, but you see all these are songs also, you know, singing O Mio Babino Caro. Sound of Music, that's also a lady that's just a couple of weeks ago here in Jackson, a lady who had actually brought her kids to one of the rehearsals that I did with the orchestra. She said, I know you, when I walked in, and the musicians, she asked for Sound of Music and actually some Mozart. And I said, why did you choose that? She said, I was thinking of my daughters, what they'd like to hear, because it was her kids who actually came with her to the rehearsal. Then a lady in her 70s said, I chose this song, Amazing Grace, because of my dad. He died when I was 19. These are tears of joy remembering him. So let's just have a look at those quotes. See if, I don't know, Sarah, can they type into a box or a chat box or something? If you want to send me something, anything that occurs to you there?
Yeah, we'd ask the audience to write into the question and answer.
Yeah, cool, great. Yeah, brilliant. So anything occurring to anybody there? Something else that's going on? Keep them coming there, guys. I chose Ode to Joy because today is my last chemo day. For my wife, I want to dedicate this to her. I was thinking what my daughters would like to hear. I chose the song. These are tears of joy. And so I'll tell you what it is. It's for my wife who's here with me. I was thinking of what my daughters, because of my dad. So the important element for me was that the music itself was acting as a vehicle or a connection over and beyond the very obvious connection, I mean, to the music. You know, the music made the connection to the musician possible, but these songs became a vehicle for compassion, stimulating further connection to compassionate people. and the experiences for the patient. And as you see in at least 2 of the above, the people weren't even present. So we take the next slide there. And that first quote, please, Circa. From this last slide, I hope you can understand why I've chosen to make 2 words central to my work, and they are compassion, connection. And I want to show you as singers how these words might play a greater role in your music making and subsequently actually in your own health. So I began to look at research around the terms compassion and connection, and I want you to introduce you to 2 very strong books, and more importantly, 2 ways of thinking that feature in the work of the American Institute of Music and Healing. And the first one is, Circa reading my mind again, thank you, Compassion Focused Therapy, or CFT for short, by Paul Gilbert. Paul is just a fantastically compassionate person with huge energy, and thank you to Paul for allowing me to dip into his world, a world that's taken, you know, many decades to create, and I'm going to present it in like 5 minutes. So my apologies to the CFT people out there. It's just a wonderful, wonderful psychotherapeutic model based on evolutionary science and neuroscience, which Paul has developed, called compassion focused therapy. And the next one is by Barbara Friedrichsen work, an American psychologist, and her book, Love 2.0, Finding Happiness and Health in Moments of Connection, is a wonderful book that I draw your attention to too. So take the next slide. This is Paul's book, Compassion Focused Therapy. Paul has written many books, but this is I suppose the one that's most abused in my house and dog-tailed and turned over and read a million times, because I find it absolutely fascinating. And there's real parallels, our work that's being done in compassion-focused therapy that we as musicians can take into our own lives and our own professions. And so one of the exercises that Paul asks us to do in CFT is, and something that we use also in the American Institute of Music and Healing, is what's the difference, or what is the difference in these terms that are up there on your screen? We have kindness, empathy, sympathy, and compassion. And you know, a lot of them are intertwined, and maybe kindness is an umbrella for everything underneath. You know, empathy and sympathy, well, they rhyme, but I suppose empathy and compassion are 2 words that are very similar, often interchanged. So feel free to type into the box there what you think. What's empathy? What's kindness? What's sympathy? What's compassion? And we'll focus just for now, because it's compassion-focused therapy, maybe on the 2 ones that are most interused or intertwined. That's empathy and compassion. Is there a difference? That's the question. Is there a difference between empathy and compassion? So Paul, I suppose empathy we would see as a sensitivity to suffering in others, you know, but Paul has a wonderful description for compassion, and it was that a sensitivity to suffering in others and a commitment to try and alleviate it. That was Paul's definition for compassion, but he's changed it since, and it's a sensitivity to suffering in self and others with a commitment to try and alleviate and prevent it. And I just typed in there at the end that I should mention that Paul's foundation, Compassionate Mind Foundation, you can find that easily online, and he has wonderful online videos for free where you can hear Paul talk about CFT, and also, of course, he's all over YouTube, so that's wonderful material to access. Okay, we'll take the next slide, Circa. I just think this is a beautiful little video. You know, it says compassion is action. That's what Paul tells us. But, you know, it's also intrinsically a part of who we are. It's instinctual. So we'll play it just for a little bit, and then we won't play it all, Circa. Thanks.
Oh. Oh. And so, here. Oh. Yeah.
Okay, Sarika, yeah, we leave it there. We take the next slide. I just absolutely love that video, and you can see that sense of, you know, accomplishment in that child. You know, oh yes, the German. So oh boy, you know, something's happened, and then he gets to solve the problem. That look of contentment that he's actually been able to help someone. Of course, as you see, you know, a little child. Nobody said go and help him. It's just intuitive. It's who we are. So this is one of Paul's diagrams. It's a very important diagram if you're involved with CFT, and it's Paul's helpful way, a very simple but really helpful model of how our brains work, really. And he divides our brain into 3 emotion or regulation systems, and they all interact, as you can see from that diagram here. I'll try and describe it to you as best I can. Again, apologies to Paul for flying over CFT in 10 minutes, but it's just such a wonderful, and even in that time, I think you can get something from it. So you see he's color coded these systems. Let's start with that threat system down there. It's that red system. It's that fight or flight. It's what's known as the old reptilian brain. So your reptilian brain is 500 million years old. So it's very difficult to fight that, you know, the fight or flight. It's just an instinctual reaction in us if you're feeling threatened. And that's that red system. And you see it interacts with the other systems. They all do. And we have this drive system over to the left. That's that blue system. That's our survival, or rather what I like to think as achieving goals. It's, you know, we're goal oriented. We want to get things accomplished, and that's our drive. Very, very important in musicians, right? Because we start learning our instrument, or we go to choir singing, and we learn at a very young age. And if we're a professional singer or a professional musician, then we know that our drive system is a very strong part of who we are. It's also a part of who we are because we're so driven. We have to be, you know, nobody's going to tell us to practice. We have to do this all by ourselves before we ever get to perform. And then we have this green soothing system. Well, of course, the music is helping that, but you know, that's the affiliation or the relaxment, the peace and contentment system. So all these 3 parts of our brain, or he divides our brain, I suppose, into these 3 systems. And so let's just do a very quick, you know, case study. So what is CFT and how could we apply it as a singer? Well, let's say I'm a musician in Ireland, okay? And you know, I'm quite successful. I do my singing, and I have gigs, and you know, I might have another job, but I'm really a musician. I sense myself as a musician, and you know, it's now COVID. I'm not getting to perform. Maybe that income is important for me to pay my rent. So suddenly this red system, this fight or flight, this freezing, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I'm coming up to Christmas, and all my Christmas gigs have been cancelled, and I'm angry. I'm angry at this. I'm anxious. Maybe I'm not disgusted, but I'm anxious, and I'm starting to worry. And this red system is really, really a big part of my daily life. And so over to this blue system, which interacts with me quite a lot, because as I say, I'm a professional musician, or even semi-professional amateur musician. I get a lot from my music. I give a lot through my music, but I get a lot. It's an important part of who I am, and I can't get to perform. So achieving goals, that third one, and maybe also survival, it's part of my income. But this achieving goals is such an important part of us as musicians, you know. We put ourselves under enormous stress to achieve and to do well. And tonight I've got a concert with Saint-Saëns Organ Symphony, wonderful soloist Paul Gilbert, and that's a big part of who I am. I need to perform, I need to do well, I put myself under stress. You all know that. And find examples in your own life, if you're not a musician, what part of me is now under threat, or is my drive system sometimes being activated. And then we have this green system over here to the right, this soothing system. This is our parasympathetic nervous system that allows us to relax. Yeah, and that's something that Paul teaches us how to activate, and draws our attention to this green system, to use this green system, which Paul refers to as a soothing or contentment system. And one of the most important aspects of CFT is learning how to be compassionate to oneself, a kind of a self-soothing. And certainly CFT is full of wonderful, wonderful ways to do this. And we need that as musicians. We need to be able to self-soothe. But Paul Gilbert also describes a social soothing. And this is where there are real parallels to singing in a choir. And the signals that trigger that soothing system are simple things. They're like facial expression, a friendly facial expression, soothing voice, or really any positive communication or interaction, all of which are present, of course, when we sing in a group. So just like the lessons learned from the American Institute of Music and Healing that show that music is a vehicle or can be an extension or connection. We see that word popping up again, connection, if you will, over and beyond the music itself. So too, the actual act of being in a choir, singing in a choir and being part of the group, forget the singing, but just being part of the group stimulates this green system, soothing system. And I'd argue that there's 2 layers of safety to singing in a choir, not just one. And so can you guess what those 2 layers might be? Well, I think it's part of singing in a choir, but it's also part of singing in a group, right? You're in a section, you're in the sopranos or the altos, and we know the alto jokes and the defensiveness and the altos. We all have fun when we're singing in a choir, and I sing as a bass, and then John Dexter used to say, well, can the basses please come in and help the tenors? And of course, we'd have great fun as bassists being the ones to save the day, and the tenors would look at us and they'd have their own fun saying, oh gosh, the basses are going to mess up the tenor line. We've all had those interactions, right, in choirs. So there's 2 levels of affiliation with others, and that stimulates that parasympathetic, that safety, that rest, peace, and contentment. I hope you agree with me. Let's take the next slide there, please. And that quote then. So by now you'll have seen that attachment is one of the most fundamental parts of us and one of the fundamental needs in us as mammals. It's just how we are. It's important, and it's simply how we were made. Next quote, Sarka. I like this quote because it's one of those clever perceptions, which is typical of Paul, that really only, I suppose, becomes self-evident after it's been pointed out to us. But he writes that there are different types of caring, and different types of caring will impact and stimulate the soothing system in different ways. Well, different types of caring, what does he mean by this? Well, he says that, for example, caring can be with or without warmth and affection. And that is true. You can be cared for, somebody can be caring for you, or somebody's caring after this, but it doesn't mean that it's with warmth and affection. But it is this warmth that is probably most associated with soothing and endorphin release. Of course, that's true. Warmth involves a number of qualities such as tenderness, gentleness, kindness, and concern, but also playfulness. So let's take this quote directly taken from Paul's book, CFT. Take that quote, it's coming in there, Sarka. I think you can fly that in. So this is from Paul. Paul tells us that warmth appears to have at least 3 key attributes. Warmth provides verbal and non-verbal signals of interest, caring, and kindness that are soothing. Warmth can stimulate liking, affection, and feelings of connectedness. Third, warmth is more likely when individuals feel safe with each other and are trusting. So we take the next slide, and what I'm going to do is what I've done there is I've just taken out the word warmth and I've literally put in singing in a choir, or singing instead of, I haven't changed a single word. So let's read it very quickly together. Singing in a choir appears to have at least 3 key attributes. Singing provides verbal and non-verbal signals of interest, caring, and kindness that are soothing. Well, maybe if you're not sight reading Xenakis or something like that, but otherwise that's true. Second, singing can stimulate liking, affection, and feelings of connect. Absolutely it can. Singing is more likely when individuals feel safe with each other and are trusting. Well, absolutely. We're not going to be singing if we're not surrounded by people that we want to be with and that stimulate us. So if you read that, or we can just go back to that there, Sarka, if you don't mind. So if you were to read that in a musical journal, then if you were to read that exactly in some kind of musical journal, I don't think you'd question its validity at all. We'll take that next slide then. Thanks, Sarka. So there are different ways in which compassion flows. Compassion flowing out from you to others, compassion flowing into you, and compassion to yourself. But let's have a look, or say, let's the parallels of singing in a choir. Let's just sing. I say singing, compassion. That's Paul's quotes there. But what if we were to substitute singing for that? Let's think you're on stage, you're singing, you're part of a choir, you're singing a solo. It doesn't really matter. Compassion or singing flowing out from you to others, absolutely. You're you're really passionate about what you do. You want to connect. We all know. How many of you, I wish you could see a show of hands, how many of you have been told by your conductor, sing to the back of the hall? I know as a little boy, chorister in St. Finbarr's Cathedral, we had to sing to the back pillar, which is really far away, which I probably couldn't see now because I'm nearsighted, and I would, but as a kid, I used to focus on that back pillar and sing to that, and you had to connect with everybody in between. So absolutely, you are taking in the whole room as a singer. That's your job. Compassion flowing into you will absolutely, you know, whether you're singing in the National Concert Hall or you're singing in a little church or just a small family gathering, everybody's there for you. And whether it's an expensive ticket or whether somebody's paid €5 at the door or paid nothing at the door to come and hear you sing, they're there to hear you sing, and they want to be part of what you're doing. And that's a wonderful example of compassion flowing into you. Compassion to yourself, well, absolutely, you know, when you're singing and you're happy about what you've done at a concert, you know, there's a wonderful sense of compassion for yourself. You feel proud of what you've done. Great. Circa will take the next one. So I've spoken about compassion and how it's played a central role in my work and why I think it's important and has true connections to singing in a choir. Now I'd like to move on to that second word for me, which is connection. So we're going to play this next slide there, please, and we can play that video.
I see trees of green. I see them blue for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue, clouds of white, bright blessed days, dark sacred nights, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the skies, also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They say, I love you. I hear babies cry. I watch them grow. They're not much more. I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Oh, yeah.
Great, Circa. Wow. So welcome to the world of Barbara Friedrichsen, and also this features in the work of the American Institute of Music and Healing. And she's written this wonderful book, Love 2.0, Creating Happiness and Health in Moments of Connection. And she's got some wonderful concepts which are backed up by scientific experiments. So we take that next slide there, Circa. And that first quote. So Barbara tells, or Barbara, I suppose in this book, really, she's redefining love. She talks about positivity, resonance, which maybe get to in a minute, but Love 2.0 is all about connection. And I suppose she's talking about love, not really in the traditional sense, but love is defined by these micro moments of connectivity or micro moments of connection. And I think we can take that as next quote. And there are those little positive interactions that we go through every day. And that's why I played the Louis Armstrong video because she says, you know, it's really that I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. So these micro moments, she says, change us. They forge new coalitions with strangers. They advance your acquaintanceship. You can read that. Each micro moment of positivity, resonance, knits you in a little tighter to the social fabric of your community, network of relationships, and your family. Next quote there, please. You know, there's, we know that, you know, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins are the chemicals responsible for your happiness. There's lots of research that shows that endorphins are released during singing. I mean, it's been proven. So actually, it's probably more likely, I think, that we can point to many elements or parts of singing in the choir and cause this. But for now, let's just stick with that word connection. And the social connection, I suppose, are these micro moments of connectivity that are a huge part of singing in a choir. So oxytocin is known as the cuddle love or the love hormone. And this comes about when there's a good feeling of social trust and where cooperation exists. It's released when you find the safety of social support. And of course, that's really where the parallels come in to singing in a choir. We take that next quote. So behaving kindly raises levels of oxytocin, which in turn curbs stress-induced rises in heart rate and blood pressure. And who doesn't need that? We all need that. Reduces feelings of depression, increases your pain thresholds. That's part of singing in a choir. Let's take that next one then, please, Serka. And as you move through your day, and I've just substituted again, like I did with the Paul Gilbert, let's say as you sing in a choir, you interact with one person after another. As you sing in a choir, these people gently nudge you to attend to those others more closely and forge connections when possible. They shape your motives and behaviors in subtle ways, yet ultimately their actions serve to strengthen your relationships and knits you in closer. The social fabric of life, all happening when you're singing in a choir. Great, so this is a short exercise. I'm trying to go and stand up so I can do that for you. But I put in there, let's go to Vegas. And of course, it's not Las Vegas. We can't go there, but it's the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is our 10th cranial nerve. And it's what is known also as our gut brain. So it's the longest nerve in the body. It goes all the way from obviously your brain all the way down through your body. It actually stops at your vocal cords, at your voice box. So it intertwines with your voice box. And there's lots of research also that's been done about your vagus nerve and how to stimulate that with singing. And it takes care of your parasympathetic, the functions of the nervous system. And that's a system you'll also remember the parallels with Paul Gilbert's slide. And that was the green comfort, or the soothing system. And there's many ways to activate that system. And I'll get to one of them in the short exercise. But the vagus nerve, yeah, it goes all the way and it goes past the vocal cords, it goes down around your lungs, and it goes down to your stomach, your gut. So it's the largest nerve in your body. And so there's lots of ways to exercise your vagal. One of the things apparently to exercise your vagal nerve is to have a really cold shower. So I'm not going to make you all do that now. Actually, another way to do is just to simply wash your face. There you go. But one parallel to singing in a choir in a way that you always access and stimulate your vagus nerve. And when you stimulate your vagus nerve, you stimulate your parasympathetic function of your nervous system. That's that soothing system, that parasympathetic nervous system that calms you. And have you guessed how you do it? The first thing you do way you do it in a choir is that you exhale longer than the in-breath. So that means if you breathe in and you exhale longer, then you have accessed your vagus.
Come on in. Fine.
You've accessed, I think your microphone is on there, Serka. You've accessed your vagus nerve. So let's just do one exercise. I'm going to turn on my video. Can you let me do it? Do I have to share my screen? What do I have to do there, Serka?
You're enlarged now so everyone can see you, and I'll start sharing your PowerPoint once you're finished.
Okay, great. So, and you can see me, I can't see myself, but that doesn't matter. I suppose I could, but so what I'd like you to do is when we're singing, and of course you do that, but one of the exercises that maybe some of you have done when you're warming up as a choir. So you breathe in and you hold your breath, and then you practice to divide your breath is maybe that you would do it over, say, 5 short exhalations. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to breathe in. So you divide your whole breath over 5 exhalations, and then if you've got some excess breath at the end, you just exhale that. So if you're anywhere where you can stand up, and if not, you can do it sitting down, but let's just try and do that. We're going to access our vagus nerve. So we breathe in, we divide it in 5. So try and relax in between. We're going to do it again. This time we're going to divide our breath in 7. So 7 short exhalations. Let's breathe in. Any excess breath, leave it out. Breathe in again. Let's try 9. Okay, Sorka, we can take that slide. So hopefully, after doing that exercise, you should be a little bit more relaxed. And we can take that next slide. So I've talked about 2 words that represent lessons learned by the American Institute of Music and Healing. And of course, we've learned lots of lessons because we make lots of mistakes. But I hope I've shown you today how compassion and connection are part of what you experience when you sing in a choir. And now that you know of compassion and connection, I'd invite you to become more mindful of them, not just when you go to your choir rehearsal, but in your own daily activities. And so allow yourself to open even more to these concepts in your own life and work. Maybe use that vagus nerve, not just as a singing exercise or a breathing exercise, but as an exercise in your own relaxation. And remember, you have the ability to activate that self-soothing part of your brain that Paul Gilbert described so well. So Sarah, we can take that next slide. For anybody interested, I want to let you know that I have just recently founded an Irish Institute of Music and Healing, which I hope in time will be able to bring the training courses that I've run in the US to Ireland with Dr. Huntley. And if anybody is interested in finding out about that, please just email me for now at the American Institute of Music website, and we can get that up to you. It's www.americanmusicandhealing.org. Just email me there if you've got any interest in that. You can take that next slide, please, Sorka. So in ending, and I want to thank you for your attention, I want to draw your attention to also Jonas Salk, who features heavily in my work. I mean, I don't have any time for him, of course, today, but he has just done such an incredible work on music, not music rather, but the connections between creativity and the sciences. And you'll know Jonas Salk as, you know, so timely now, because he created the first vaccine for polio, which was just really a horrible time in the world. You know, in the States, if a little town had polio or a city had polio, the train would literally not stop there. So very big parallels to what's going on in the world today. And I'm delighted to say that I've got a lot of contact, or some contact, with son Jonathan Salk, who has endorsed the work of the American Institute of Music and Healing. Jonas Salk was just absolutely convinced. He created the Salk Institute in La Jolla, and he asked for it wanted to be a crucible of creativity. So that's work that we're also doing in the American Institute of Music and Healing, is finding these parallels between creativity and what they can mean to the sciences and for healthcare in particular. So it's so important. All the problems that we're facing nowadays, we see it now with the pandemic, all the mistakes that we're making, because we've never solved these problems. Gosh, in Ireland we closed down, and then even with the clothes for the kids, and you can buy this, but you can't buy that. Of course, we're going to make mistakes, but the people that will solve those mistakes, and people just in healthcare in general, if you're finding a cure for cancer, you're so used to making mistakes, you have to make mistakes, and you have to be creative. So in ending, I want to mention I suppose this quote because Jonas Salk, you know, compassion and connection represents important ingredients in a new world where Salk tells us will and must see a shift, and we see it already, from independence to interdependence, where competition will shift to cooperation, a change in human values that is important, he tells us, if we are all to survive. And we see it now in the pandemic, where we witness how important connection is and how it affects all of us when we're deprived of it, both globally and interpersonally in our own communities. And, you know, where a grandparent is deprived of the loving hug of a grandchild. We see compassion and the courage of healthcare workers, because, you know, compassion, Paul Gilbert tells us, is not a weak trait, but one that often demands courage, as shown by the compassionate courage of our healthcare workers. And so I want to leave you with this quote from Jonas Salk, and his son Jonathan Salk, who is the support, as I said, of the work that we're doing. And he writes, "We are at a point in the course of human evolution when the demands of survival converge with the higher ideals of humankind and the well-being and flourishing of human society. It's up to us to see that we navigate this transition, adapting to and emerging in a new reality." We'll take that next slide. So Helen, Phelan, thank you so much for asking me to do this and for motivating me to find ways and links between the work of the AMH and the wonderful work that's being done at UL by you, Helen, and of course the wonderful Hilary Moss also, who's been so kind to me. So thank you, University of Limerick, and thank you so much, Helen, and thank you to all of you for listening in.